Um, what we're going to be doing today is you can keep working on those photographs you need to take, but you also have a slide where you're asked to come up with 8 modernist points, okay? 8 characteristics of modernism. Now, I looked at that question, I thought, 8, that's a lot. And how am I going to do that without repeating myself? So I'm going to help you scaffold that whole conversation. So what I've done is I have gone into the Art Gallery in New South Wales, and I'll give you the link for this for these images. And what I've done is I've looked at the images and I've thought about characteristics. I've written down a whole series of characteristics that you will find that modernism has. Now, you're not going to always find every single one of these characteristics in every single image, okay? Art isn't obviously that, it's not a mathematical exercise where you have to make sure it has to meet all of the characteristics, okay? But in general, if you wanted to talk about generalized characteristics, these would be the 8 things that would come up, okay? So the first point that I came up with was boldness. And in this instance, the first thing I would talk about when we talk about boldness is strength, okay? So a strong, there's a lot of aspects of these images that are strong, the contrasts are strong, but also focus, okay? So in this instance, you could talk about the focus, okay? The thing that makes this image bold is that it's sharply focused, a sharp focus, okay? Remember we talked about pictorialism? And pictorialism was the style of photography that came before modernism, and it was mimicking painting, okay? So it was usually soft focus. They would quite often put Vaseline on the lens to make the focus blurry, okay? So strong focus is a modernist characteristic, okay? So that might be the first point that we'll be talking about. We also have strong contrast. What do I mean by strong contrast? Well, you can see in this image, you've got deep, dark shadows and strong highlights or light highlights, okay? And the difference between those two is extreme. So I can step through these images and you can see a lot of them have that strong highlight, okay? You can see how dark the background is in this image here, okay? We've got strong contrast. Also, geometric, okay? So geometry is quite often emphasized in these images, okay? Not in every single one, but you can see here the geometry, okay? Lines and shapes, okay, are emphasized. Even in things that are natural, such as this desert, you can see there's strong shapes that are outlined. So geometry is being emphasized. Also, modern subject matter, okay? With pictorialism, we had landscape, we had portraiture, we had still life, okay? Still life is paintings of things, you know, like a bowl of fruit. Portraiture is people, and landscape is the landscape around us. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's a landscape, and that's a building, and that's a plant, so it could be still life. But the thing you've got to remember is that with pictorialism, when you're talking about a portrait, it would have a standard composition. You would never have an extreme close-up. The person would normally be shown within a full scene. Okay, you wouldn't crop things out. Same thing would happen with a landscape. If an artist was doing a landscape, quite often you would have that traditional landscape feature where you would have foreground, middle ground, background. You'd have a certain amount of sky, whereas this is very little sky, very high horizon line. Okay, and it's cropped, and it's very much unlike a traditional landscape, okay? We can see that. So that's another thing. The geometry, modern subject matter, and also with modern subject matter, so traditional pictorialism was those 3 things, portraiture, landscape, and still life. The modernists would have modern subject matter. So they would celebrate modern life, okay, machines, okay, construction, all that sort of stuff, okay. So that's another thing that a celebration of the modern rather than looking back to the past like the pictorialists were doing, modernism was saying, we're living in the here and now, let's celebrate the here and now. Okay, so that's another thing, modern subject matter. Cropping. So cropping is where you quite often leave out things that would normally be put inside a composition for a pictorialist picture. And it's quite often happens when you zoom in on a subject matter as well. So that's cropping. So that's something that you'll see quite often in modernist images as well. You wouldn't have seen it traditional pictures, especially compositions, sort of traditional compositions. They're normally balanced. They normally don't crop things out. Okay, that started to happen with modernism, and even in paintings with that happened in the modernist era, painting started to mimic that cropping that would happen in photography. Okay, which wouldn't have happened before photography. And then we have finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Okay, so a modernist person would grab an object. I mean, obviously, pictorialists would do still life scenes, but they would like fill the scene with a fruit bowl and musical instruments and food and etc. etc. So lots of things in the image. Whereas a modernist photographer might find a really everyday object and crop it, zoom in on it, light it in a very strong way, look at it from a strange angle, and make the ordinary into something that's extraordinary. And do we have an example of that? Yes, we do. We looked at Olive Cotton's Teacup Ballet, and that was a really good example of making something that was ordinary, a teacup or a bunch of teacups on a table, and by lighting it in a spectacular way, we're able to turn it into something extraordinary. Okay. Also, a great point is that modernism is a reaction to pictorialism. So pictorialism is photography that's aping or mimicking painting, okay, and the past, and having the same subject matter as images from the past. Modernism is a reaction to that. It's going, I'm not going to look at the past, I'm going to look at the present, okay? I'm going to portray those images in a completely different light, completely different way, straight photography, rather than trying to pretend to be a painting. Okay, and when we talk about all those things we're talking about, cropping, zooming in, looking at things from a strange angle, etc., what tends to happen sometimes when we do that is an image becomes abstracted. Now we all know what abstract painting is, I hope. It's a painting that doesn't have a subject matter, okay? Or it's a painting of something that might have a subject matter but it's very distorted, okay? So it's making something very unrecognizable, okay? And sometimes without subject matter. So even though this image is of a desert, if you were to squint your eyes and look at it, it would just become patterns, beautiful organic shapes, but essentially it becomes more about the geometry than the subject matter, which is a desert. Okay, so abstraction, because of zooming in, cropping, looking at things from strange angles, is another point that we can talk about when we're talking about modernism. So what I might do now is I might turn around and I will give you those 8 points, but you're going to have to write the sentences, okay? So we've got 8 characteristics of modernist photography. Okay. We went 1, bold. Now you need to write a full sentence for all of these, and you can obviously go back to all the research that I gave you, we did in class on modernism, pictorialism as well. But in my video, or this video, one of the things I mentioned was focus. What about focus is different? You'll need to do your research. 2, strong contrast. And that's all about how light is treated, light and shadows. So your sentence will need to talk about those ideas. 3, geometry. Okay, that's all about shapes. 4, modern subject matter. Okay, compared to the Pictorialist, which was traditional. Okay, what else we got? 5, cropping. So we're talking about zooming in plus leaving things out of the frame, as in the frame of the camera. You can't see things off the edge of the picture. 6, finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. And for that, I talked about olive cotton, teacup ballet. 7, it was a reaction to Pictorialism. Now for that sentence, you might want to talk about in what way was it a reaction to Pictorialism, okay? Talk about the subject matter and how the subject matter is treated in both of those movements, okay? Modernism and Pictorialism, okay? And then 8, I talked about abstraction, okay? And how images become abstract because of the way they are photographed. I will give you a link to that art gallery in New South Wales site. It might be of assistance. You've got all the work you've done on Max Dupain, all the work you've done on Olive Cotton as well, and now you've got a roadmap for that slide. But each one of these points needs to be fleshed out with a sentence on the slide that goes in your assignment, okay? So this lesson, what I'd like you to do is look back at your modernism and pictorialism research that you did, and then you need to write a sentence based on those points there. Now I rabbited on in this video for quite a while, and you can mine this video for some information as well, okay? But I would really like you to go back and look at the images and really think about the things that I'm saying, and look through some modernist images and see if you can see those characteristics in the images, okay? Because it's going to assist you in being able to identify if an image is modernist or if it is a pictorialist image. And all of these images you're taking for this folio need to be modernist. So in some way, they need to reflect these characteristics. Not all of them. Each image might not have all 8 of them in it, but it's going to have enough of them to make the image look like it's a modernist image. Anyway, any questions you have, please by all means email me and ask me. I'm happy to answer any questions you've got. Use this lesson to finish those points. Once you've done that, you've got a slide on your slideshow that's done, okay? And then you can, if you finish that work early, keep taking photos, okay? Because the more you learn about what a modernist image is, the better your images are going to become, in the sense that they become more like a modernist image, is what we're trying to do for this assignment. Anyway, hope that helps, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Missing you all. Hopefully you'll be back soon.